It's Abu Dhabi. Right, we are live. Hello and welcome back then to SFR F1. We're back where we left off. We are at Abu Dhabi for the season opener of season 5, and I'm delighted to we found a way for me to be joined by the wonderful Tomo as well. Tomo, how are you today?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, Torin. It feels kind of weird, not being able to see you in person, but we're here, we're back. New season, new game, and can't wait to dive in. As you correctly say, we're right where we left off, a circuit that these guys will be very familiar with, but with new bits of kit.
And new driver numbers as well, as Zombel going out there sporting the number 5 on his hat for the first time. Obviously, it's now a number that can be available. Kagoda are no longer reigning champion for the first time. He is not the reigning champion going into a new season. Um, loses his number 21 to Nick DeVries, who ironically doesn't really hold it anymore either. So, a few driver changes then to run you through, I suppose, first of all. And one of the notable off-season changes was Kagoda returning to the Mercedes outfit where he had those successes before, after the season with Ferrari that ended in just utter shock, Tom, in the finale at this very track only a couple months ago.
It was an incredible finish. I mean, I'm sure it's one that will live long in the memory of most, if not all, SFR fans as one of the great races, and it just happened to be one that decided the championship in a final showdown on F1 22. You wonder whether it sort of still plays into the mind coming back to this track of Kagoda, but as you say, Torin, he's importantly in a new setup. I say new setup, it is new, but he's been here before. Not for a little while, but just after one season with Ferrari, obviously didn't quite go too well for him, but he was still in the championship fight, but it wasn't quite that fairy tale first championship. But he's gone back, and interestingly, he's been joined by Big Sauce, who has come out of retirement as team principal and team manager to partner up. That could be definitely something to keep an eye out.
Yeah, absolutely. Big Sauce was a very influential second driver to Kagoda during his championship winning seasons. So to see him back on the grid is fantastic. And it's great as well, just some of the names. So over at Ferrari, we've got Arjan and Fico. That'll be an interesting pairing to see how they go through this season. As well as Lennart making the move to Alpine. So Lennart, one of those drivers we've yet to really see the full potential of, I think, in this series. And Alpine might be a bit of a challenge, but we know they're a team that want to return to the front, and desperately, I would have thought they'll be trying to do so. Vodka as well, now in the Red Bull alongside Rillatorn. Haas with Benny and Zumbel, a very balanced driver pairing for the American outfit as they set the first flying lap of the new season. Zumbel with a 124.321, very satisfying, as Test Will with a 124.883. And it's worth reminding as well that obviously this championship we are using the realistic performance, so I'd imagine that what you'll be seeing on the screen right now is to be expected as Alex in the Aston Martin goes on to provisional pole in the number 69, or 66 rather, Aston Martin. Obviously provisional pole a bit early, but Benny beats that in the Haas. And Tom, one team that I'd imagine we'll be watching quite close eyes on, as we've got a spin in Sector 3, or a slow moving car, that's FB. So it seems like it might have been a mistake there, but he's up and running again in the number 26 Alpine. But I was going to say, Tom, Aston Martin, they're a team who will be looking for a huge change in fortunes this season.
They definitely will, Torin. You're exactly right. They're a team that has showed glimpses of potential, but ultimately hasn't really come to fruition. They were last place in last year, or last season, should I say, constructor standings. They've got a solid lineup though, with Andrej, who is a bit of a stalwart of the series. He's had a long time here. He knows the ins and outs of how things work. And also Alex, the British driver. He's one of those talents that has come up through the ranks, and I'm personally really excited to see how he's going to get on. And there's a few drivers that I would say for me, excite me just as much as Alex with that real season where they can start to show their mettle and rise through the ranks, maybe challenge some of their teammates that have been in the series for slightly longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And worth mentioning as well that we've got another driver number that will look rather familiar, and it feels like a rather strange alternative universe. As, the Aston Martin sporting the number 3, which I'm sure me and Tom will not like to see that number being used by someone in SFR, but it's just great to see SFR back out there, and we're now seeing some of the big guns coming out of the pits. FICO and Vodka of Ferrari and Red Bull respectively coming out of the pits, and we got a spin again in turn 1, or a stationary car. Oh, it's the Williams of Waps, and he's currently P6 at 124.836, just ahead of Testable, K-Lot, and a little bit ahead of FB, who had that mistake on his flying lap. As we've got Max Martin. Max Martin, another name, Tom, that I reckon will be one to watch. He was hugely impressive in the Alfa Romeo last season, pretty much throughout the season. So we'll watch close eye on this on board. But do you have any drivers, Tom, that early on here you reckon are going to set the series alight?
It's hard to tell, Torin. I think we've got a few exciting drivers, a couple of new ones, but I think for me, possibly the real team, if I can pick a team, would probably be Ferrari. They won the constructors last season. They didn't win the drivers' championship in that all-important finale. But with Kagoda leaving, that did leave a space. And I think their driver lineup of FICO and Arjan is really, really, really exciting. It's quite a young pairing. I think those guys both have experience at the top. They were 3rd and 4th, with FICO just beating out Arjan in the standings. So obviously big shoes to fill at Ferrari with the departure of Kagoda, but I think they've got what it takes to maybe on their day challenge one or two of the Red Bulls at the top of the standings.
Well, Tom, the time has come and he's emerged from the pits. It is Kagoda, number 7, back in the Mercedes. And it reminds me of the saying, I think it's the king is dead, long live the king. Kagoda going into a season as not the reigning champion for the first time in SFR history. And Tom, I'll hand it over to you, and with the assistance of our handy camera crew as well, in a moment to do an onboard lap, your classic flying lap with Kagoda. We're just watching him do his outlap here, and you got to think what's going to be going through his mind as he prepares to take on the assault of another, what's surely going to be a competitive season, as Rillatorn's still in the pits and a number of drivers still yet to set laps. But Tom, what are your expectations of Kagoda this season, quickly, before we get onto your flying lap on board of him?
I think, to be honest, if he can have a season where he's challenging for the championship, at least in the first half, he'll be more than pleased. I think that Mercedes may struggle at times to keep up with the pace of the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. With this realistic performance, and as we've seen this year, the Ferraris aren't quite as close to the Red Bulls, so it might mean that maybe in that best of the rest behind what we expect to be the front-running duo of the Bulls, he might actually have a shout. But he chucks it into the final corner where his championship challenge ended last season, and we're going to ride on board now with Kagoda into turn 1. It's almost a 90-degree left-hander ride on the curbs, up through the gears, and this is nearly flattened these new generation cars. And it's how brave are you on that outside curb. Don't kick up too much of it, though. You'll get the car bouncing, as a couple of our drivers have done previously. It's the move then that we saw from Max Verstappen on Lewis Hamilton, that turn 5, all important, but he's navigated that beautifully, opened the DRS, and it's firing down the back straight, the car roaring into 8th gear, and the only thing he's got to do now, pick his braking point just before the 100-meter mark. Don't take too much speed into that first left and right hander, otherwise you're going to compromise yourself with this, the second DRS zone. This is slightly new for some older F1 fans. It's one swooping left-hander. You've got to keep a good amount of minimum speed on entry point and exit, fire out. And this is where it happened last year, where he was contacted. He got sent through onto that runoff but he doesn't this time round. Slows the car down, gets it turning. It's got a beautiful turning radius, this Mercedes, this season. He's obviously got it set up how he likes. Only 2 more corners to go now. The right hand of the Ferrari gets out of the way. 1 more corner. It's so easy to lose traction on this exit as it's slightly off camber, over the curbs, across the line, and it's 3rd place. Not too far away from the Red Bull and the Ferrari, but maybe he would have been hoping for slightly better.
Well, it's great to have those flying laps back. I thoroughly enjoyed having it back, and it was interesting to see as you started following Kagoda's lap. Vrillatorn came out of the pits. He was the Red Bull driver on the left who had to dive out of the way, sporting Max Verstappen's Miami 2023 helmet this season in the number 15 Red Bull. It's a design I was actually just talking about the other day. It's always good to see these things getting brought into the game as Kagoda returns a favour, gets out of Vrillatorn's way. Got 7 minutes left of the session here, and currently in the drop zone is Test Will, K-Lot, Arjan, Vrillatorn, and Seven Echo. Arjan and Vrillatorn, the 2 names really standing out in that drop zone, are currently on their first flying laps of the session. However, Seven Echo hasn't emerged from the McLaren pit lane just yet. So it'll be interesting to see whether we actually see him in this qualifying session, as now Arjan coming towards the end of his flying lap. FICO, his teammate, at 122.657, currently in 2nd place. That'll be the time he's aiming for in the number 8 Ferrari, but he's bailed out of this lap by the looks of it to come to the pits. So Arjan will still be in the drop zone. Vrillatorn, however, our reigning world champion in the Red Bull, dives into the final corner, and across the line it's a 122.357, and that's a man intent on defending his title crown.
It definitely is, Torin. That is pretty scary. Is probably the word. If you're not only his teammate Vodka, but also the other competitors looking at that time. But this is not what Q1 is ultimately about. It's about eliminating those last few places on the grid. One of those, surprisingly for me, is Seven Echo. Hasn't set a time along with Arjan. And okay, yes, they've got 5 minutes 30 left in the session, but by the time you come out of the pits, do a warm-up lap, set your flying lap, and if you really want to, if you're really feeling adventurous, do another cool down and go again, you're only really going to have time for 1, if you're really lucky, 2 laps at it. So not only if you get a lap disallowed for track limits, but also if you have a slight mistake on your first one, it means there's a hell of a lot of pressure on those 2 drivers. You look at where their teammates are, 3rd and 8th. It's a hell of a lot of pressure riding on their shoulders now.
Absolutely, and there's a pressure on the bottom 2's shoulders, I would imagine, out of everyone on this grid. And really, I think that one of the hot seats this season is going to be anywhere that we see, you know, unexpected competitiveness, as Test Will has a huge moment through the final corner, and he's not improved enough to get himself out of the drop zone, as Arjan begins another flying, or outlap rather. Huge performance so far though by Luke Mills and the Williams to be P7 provisionally. Obviously still time left in this session, but lots of drivers now beginning to leave garages, start flying laps, and there's a couple of crucial ones. Arjan is out on a outlap, but no movement as of yet by Seven Echo from the McLaren garage, so I don't know if that's a previous penalty or if that's just they're opting out of qualifying today, but remains to be seen really. Impressive though so far from, yeah, as I say, the likes of Lennart, Luke Mills, Dan Edwin and Max Martin, 2 somewhat similar names of those double A's in there, but they are both drivers who I would imagine we'll see coming to blows a couple times this season. Here comes Arjan then. He's also got K-Lot, Waps and Test Will. Well, I think Test Will's on an in lap, but Waps coming through into the final sector now. Past his teammate, but here comes Arjan then through the first corner. The left-hander, he's also sporting Max Verstappen's Red Bull Miami helmet. So bit of a confusing one there in the Ferrari with a Red Bull helmet. Lennart retires from the session. He must be happy with that lap time. Understandably so, splitting the Mercedes. And Big Sauce on his return impressing so far. I think the top 6 would be the minimum he'd be expecting, and Arjan could knock him out of that here. As Sevenako joins us on track for the first time this season in his McLaren. Very Lando Norris-esque neon yellow helmet being sported there by the Papaya car. Here comes Arjan then flying through the middle sector. He needs a lap of, I would imagine, at least a 123.6 or higher, as it's going to start heating up amongst that mid-pack. And he needs a lap at all here as well, really. He's about to come up on some traffic, and he's going to only really be able to hope that they're able to get out of the way before he reaches them. It's one of the Aston Martins. Oh, that looked a bit close, but I think it's okay. I don't think it would have compromised him too much. And he's got one of the McLarens ahead of him on track currently too. But here comes Arjan then to set a flying lap at 123.7, slots him into 10th place, as I say. 123.8, I'd imagine, or lower he'd be safe, so he might just about get through on that lap time. Iggsy's then through the final corner. Days 16th, just ahead of his teammate Testwill, who's currently on an outlap. Sevenako begins his first flying lap of the 2023 season, or season 5 as we call it, the first flying lap for him of this game cycle. And the two McLarens, oh, that was a little bit close to call there on the toe, but they executed it very well indeed. And Sevenako is number 78, and Dan Edwin is number 3, I think, which is not to fixate on the numbers too much, but it's interesting to see the number 3 on a McLaren again. It's a bit of realism in there. So Sevenako, as I say, got that massive toe that could help him, but he's about to come across, as Yuki Tsunoda would put it, traffic paradise with the Mercedes up ahead. Gets out of the way. And then there's the Haas, and further down the road the AlphaTauri, but hopefully they won't get in the way too much of his flying lap. FB is the driver at risk. He's also on a flying lap currently. As we get to crunch time, 40 seconds left of the session. Testwill crosses the line. It's not enough to bring him up any places. It is an improvement, but looks like he'll stay 17th. And we've also now seen FB drop into the drop zone. Sevenako goes 14th for 123.308. Here comes Iggsy's, and can Iggsy's improve and get out of the drop zone for AlphaTauri? Not looking likely. And no, he will drop out of qualifying here. Who else have we got left on flying laps? Waps on an out lap, but might be able to get one more lap in here. Kalot currently down in 20th. Sevenako now the man at risk after just setting a lap time, and the checkered flag falls. And I don't know if Waps, looks like Waps might have done enough there to get another lap in the Williams. Kalot coming through into the final sector now. He'll be the next driver to see the end of their qualifying session. Can he join his teammate Max Martin in Q2? Alfa Romeo will be looking to build on last season here, and Kalot will be looking to get out of the drop zone. A 125.084, currently his best time, the only driver in the 125s. Can Kalot do anything here? Bit of a moment in the final corner, and it's not an improvement in the end. He stays 20th place. Zombel also on a lap. Both AlphaTauri still on track. Here comes Testwill through the final corner. Once again, another moment. Lots of drivers having big moments through there. Testwill does improve ahead of his teammate, but stays 17th and out of qualifying here in Q1. The next driver to cross the line of that drop zone, well, just outside the drop zone, Sevenako not improving. He'll come into the pits and hope that none of the drivers behind can improve. Here comes Iggsy's. Marginal so far for Iggsy's. Depending on this final sector, he might manage to claw his way into Q2. He doesn't. He stays 18th behind his teammate. Zombel diving into the pits, not improving on this lap time. So the only driver left to follow is Waps. Waps has been improving on this lap though. Can he join his Williams teammate in Q2? Waps through the final corner, slides his way through, does improve, but it's still P19 for the seasoned veteran of the SFR series. Sevenako sneaks his way through into Q2. And we lose Zombel from Haas, the pair of AlphaTauri drivers of Testwill and Iggsy's, Waps in the Williams, and finally Kalot in the Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, an important session there for Sevenako to make it through. He'll be slightly disappointed. I think alongside that will be the likes of Waps and Kalot, their teammates making it through to the next stage. Really disappointing from AlphaTauri there. It seemed that their drivers were, although it was good that they were kind of good on the same pace, so it means in terms of data-wise, it means they're getting similar results. It's not the results they would want for the team that finished 8th last time out in the series. An interesting little fact for you. I know some of you like to have these every now and again. Well, maybe today was history repeating itself. Last time out, there were only 2 drivers that were knocked out from Q1 because there was only 17 drivers in the race. One of those drivers was Zombel in 16th. He's done the same thing again in the same car. Maybe that means we'll have the same driver on pole. Who was on pole that day? Kagoda, with Rollatorn right behind him. Who knows? Could be exciting Q3.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I'd hope to see a couple of drivers maybe think they went to Q3, but we will have to see. And what a performance that was from Luke Mills and Alex, the pair of Brits. Really looking to improve their team's seasons from last season. It must be said, Aston Martin with that new car, they should be looking at least one car in Q3, you would have thought. But here we go then, straight into Q2, no rest for the wicked. As we lose 5 cars, 15 remaining. Go on to Q2 to fight it out once again. And this should be quite an interesting session. We'll definitely see more of a representative time, I'd imagine, from some of the front runners, if those times in the first session weren't already. As Max Martin, eager to get out, is the first driver out on track. And I'd be interested, Tom, in while it's topical as well to bring up, seeing if we adopted ever that qualifying, whatever you'd call it, qualifying platform as such, the way that it was structured rather, of the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely. I was confused at the start, and I got to admit, I was a little bit cynical, if that's the right word to use, of how it would work. But do you know what? It produced an interesting qualifying session. If you're looking at it literally, that's what it did. I think seeing it at other circuits, like maybe somewhere similar to Abu Dhabi, where there's um, a different kind of track, less sort of slow speed and very corner and aero heavy, I think would be a good thing. But this session here is, I like to call it SFR prime time. It always tends to be, for me at least, the most exciting session. Loads of interesting stacks and facts going on. It was actually quite nice in Q1 to have a sort of mix of teams knocked out, meaning I believe you've pretty much got, apart from AlphaTauri, every single constructor still in the running. So a lot of these guys will be very much hoping to get through to Q3. As you rightly pointed out, Torin, that improved Aston Martin performance means that it's going to be harder than ever for the best of the rest, if you can call it, to get a spot in that top 10. Unless none of these guys make a mistake, we could see Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, Aston Martin locking out Q3. But we'll wait and see. People like FB tend to go really, really well around here. Some other drivers to look out for, possibly the likes of Luke, who had a really interesting Q1. They might scrape it into the top 10.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you for that. And it's worth mentioning as well, this is the bit of a revolutionary session in terms of for SFR. This is the first time we've done a cross-play, so welcome to everyone from the EA side of things. Welcome to the world of SFR, because, as I say, that was previously something that we weren't able to accommodate, but it's exciting now in this new era to have this sort of way of running the league. It's fantastic, and yeah, it's going to be an exciting, as Tom says, Q2 is the time where we really see absolute abject chaos right at the end of the session. And I'd imagine that we might see a few people get caught out even. But it'd be great to see as many constructors through to Q3 as possible, as many different constructors. Just remains to be seen. But we've got our first few flying laps coming in now. Max Martin in the Alfa Romeo. Oh, he's spun! He's into the wall! And it was looking like a really good lap time until that moment in time. Benny goes around and set the first lap of Q2. Lennart then smashes it. And Max Martin eventually gets it turned around and across the line. But that was disastrous for Max Martin, unbelievably so, spinning through the final corner. FICO goes into first place then in this session so far, at 122.874. Then it's Lennart, Benny, FB, Aston Martin of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is Pandish Pan. But if not, it's DM, because I can't read out our whole name. The Dan Edwin now going in between. And then Max Martin crawling around the track. I don't know if that would have caused any damage. Luke Mills goes into 4th place, only 1.3 seconds off the pace of the Ferrari. So once again, that Williams showing some impressive pace. Kagoda onto a flying lap, as is Vodka and Alex. Alex coming towards the end of his flying lap through the final corner. Where's the Aston Martin driver going to put his machine? It's 4th fastest for Alex. So once again, quite an impressive time. But will it be enough to get him through to Q2? Bit early to tell, but Sevenaka now flying up, as is Big Sauce and Vodka, as well as Rillatorn. All on flying laps now and coming towards the end of their flying laps. Well, as Sevenaka retires from the session, Sevenaka had a moment in the first corner perhaps. Let's try and get on board with a driver going through that first corner. Oh, there's 2 that we would have been able to hop on board with are going into the pits. Here comes Arjan, he'll be the next driver to cross the line. Go onto a flying lap. This driver's in the background. Across the line, Vodka with a 122.733. Setting the benchmark. Kagoda a 122.986. He goes into 3rd place. We've got more drivers crossing the line now. Max Martin took an extra lap to try and warm up those tyres after the mistake on his first flying lap. But it hasn't been enough to improve, actually. Or it wasn't really, I don't think, representative once again. Here comes Big Sauce then through the final corner in the second Mercedes seat. And it's going to be a 124.1 for him. So a little bit of time to find on his teammate. Rillatorn then the defending world champion into the final double right-hander in the Red Bull, not Williams, in the Red Bull, very different car to the Williams, and he crosses the line, and it's 3rd fastest. So FICO currently splitting the 2 Red Bulls here in Q2. That is quite an interesting fact of the matter. Sevenako then, I'm assuming, must have had some sort of incident into the first corner. Didn't catch what happened there, but here comes Arjan to complete his flying lap, and at this point everyone will have set a flying lap. The number 8 Ferrari coming through the final corner. Where's he going to be in comparison to his teammate? He's 5th fastest, so 3 places behind, and about 0.4 of a second as well is the difference.
Yeah, FICO has always been pretty quick around here. In his Mercedes last year, he was able to beat his teammate Dan, who is no slouch. But yeah, maybe that's gone slightly against our script, Torin. Expecting Red Bull to be the top team pretty comfortably, and of those 2 drivers, Rillatorn to maybe lead the way, but it isn't. It's Vodka, who is... This isn't necessarily a surprise. It's maybe gone against the grain of what we'd expect, but it's far from a surprise. Vodka, we know, can put in those one-lap wonders, the Portuguese driver. And yeah, it's good to see Kagoda up there as well. He's not that far off Rillatorn either. The last of the drivers in those 1-minute 22s. 2 drivers I'd expect to maybe improve slightly would be Evby, considering where his teammate is Lennart, and also Big Sauce and Arjan possibly upping the pace a touch as well.
Well, it's a handful of drivers, Tom, that we know on this grid can outdrive their machinery, and we know Kagoda's one of them. He won one of his championships in the 2022 Mercedes, for example. Rillatorn, when he first made his name coming up in the ranks, in the Haas, constant Q2 appearances and a few Q3 appearances by him. Now he's a world champion with Red Bull. And the other one is Lennart. We know that Lennart can outdrive his machinery as well, but that gap by Kagoda back to the leaders, I think there's more to come from Kagoda in this qualifying session. And Rillatorn too. I don't think either have quite shown their hand just yet, as Luke Mills goes racing past the commentary box in the Williams. He is the driver in danger as such. He is the driver in 10th place, which is the final place that get through to Q3. And of the drivers behind, I do reckon Luke Mills might have a chance here to give us the first Williams in Q3 that we've seen in quite a while. And that would be quite a sight to see more constructors in the final session than ever. But here comes Luke Mills then. He's the only driver currently on track. Got a clear track ahead of him. 6 minutes left on the session as well. So I'd anticipate we'll have a few more minutes yet before we see anyone come out onto the track. And you'll notice as well that 6th to 7th is where the biggest gulf is. In fact, it's about the exact gap of Lennart from Vodka that it is from Lennart to Benny. It's not far off, at least, if anything else. But Luke Mills, I'd imagine, will be looking to slot himself somewhere between those two. And I'd say anyone from Benny downwards, that's where you're going to be looking at. You need to be the last one across the line. It's less than 0.4 of a second from 7th down to 13th. And Max Martin, with his incidents, I would imagine he would have been right up there as well. But here comes Luke into the pits then. So he won't set a flying lap. But he's still in 10th. So the Williams driver still looking good for a possible Q3 appearance here. As we get into this real moment of silence before the chaos. Tom, I'm going to ask you for your prediction. What 4 are we losing from Q2?
Wow, that's not even who's on pole. That's you
No,
give.
I normally just ask you who's on pole, but I'm giving you a harder task today with no data really to back it up as well.
Yeah, definitely a first race of the new era of SFR. Do you know what? I think it's really tricky because I think FB possibly has the pace. I mean, there's nothing in it. You look from sort of Alex down to FB, there's really incremental gaps from each of those drivers. I think maybe those sort of Dan down to Seven Echo are probably going to stay the same. I think the McLaren just seems to lack a little bit of pace around here for whatever reason. Maybe that's something they can iron out. I mean, we've seen in real life once the upgrades come on that thing, it's absolutely fantastic. So maybe that's a little bit of hope for them. But I think maybe FB will do the business. I think that Alpine with Lennart's lap just has slightly more pace in hand. I think if FB can put pedal to the metal on the track, it might leave Luke outside of the top 10. So yeah, I think I'm going Luke outside of the top 10, and then the rest of the Q2 knockouts as they are currently. Maybe a shuffle. I think Andrej might be able to jump ahead of Dan. Alex has shown that Aston Martin's got a little bit of pace. Who knows though? It honestly, that's what I think, but it could go either way.
Yeah, spot on. I think that I just get the feeling that we might lose Big Sauce in Q2 just with how competitive it's going to get. Of course, he was a team principal last year and led that Mercedes team to all of their triumphs that they managed throughout the season. But now he is back, and as a driver, he's got a bit of a gap to his teammate. They'll be looking to bridge 1.2 seconds or so. But he's one to watch, as is Luke Mills. I think Luke will be one of those drivers to keep a keen eye on. I really can't predict who's going to go out, but we are into the final 3 minutes now, and the drivers are leaving the pit lane to head to the track one last time. This is going to be a thoroughly exciting end to Q2. Don't tune away. I know it can be tempting to. Q3 is where it gets all decided, and then the race is the one to really look forward to, but Q2 in an SFR session, and right now it's looking closer than ever, as with another Verstappen helmet being sported there by Luke Mills, the Verstappen.com helmet. This stream is not endorsed by Max Verstappen helmet designs at all. They are simply a customizable option in EA's, well, I say EA's, it's the EA Codemasters combination game. But as I say, about half the grid, or half the remaining drivers rather, currently on outlaps from Alex downwards. Captain FICO retires from the session. He'll be confident, and I think rightfully so. I'd say the top 4 are probably safe. As I say, probably down to Lennart is safe just about, but we'll have to see who can pull out some huge gains here. And that from Benny is going under the radar a bit, but that is massively impressive. As we go into the final 1 minute 50, and here we go then. Volatorn also retiring from the session. He's gained 0.001 of a second on Captain FICO by retiring from the session, which is an odd little glitch there, but...
Yeah, you rightly pointed that out, Torin. Benny, that's a great lap. He's joined his rivals from McLaren. might be on the cusp, so it's no wonder he's going out on an outlap. We'll see whether he can stay in the top 10.
Well, he keeps playing with the DRS wing like that down a straight while he's coasting. He might break it, but he's, I suppose maybe it's a sign of intimidation to the Williams and Luke Mills that goes flying on past on a flying lap. Luke Mills improving more so, not quite enough to get past Big Sauce here. Big Sauce also onto a flying lap. The first driver to finish that flying lap will be Max Martin. Here he comes then towards the final corner. We're into the last minute of qualifying here. Can Max Martin get himself into the top 10? Past the likes of Dan Edwin at FB. He can. He goes to P7 ahead of Benny into that gap between Lennart and Benny. And the next driver to cross the line will be Lennart. He coasts though to let past the Aston Martin of Andrej, who comes into the pits. So rather anticlimactic so far. Who's going to be the next driver to cross the line? It's Lennart going on to a final flying lap as we get into the final 30 seconds of this session. Here comes Luke Mills then, currently sat in 11th place. He goes to 5th, faster than Andrej. Only 0.5 of a second off the fastest lap we've had in this session. Here comes Benny then, he's on the brink of being knocked out. And he hasn't improved, but he might have one more lap in him and in those tyres so far. Here comes Dan Owen to the line, 5th place. He goes ahead of Luke Mills. And can there be an improvement by Arjan? No, there isn't. But he just about scrapes in. He might get one more flying lap in here in qualifying. Big Sauce in the drop zone. He needs to improve here in the Mercedes. Where does he go from 12th, 10th? He's in the danger spot, but he's crossed the checkered flag now. So Benny and Alex have the chance to knock the Mercedes driver out in Q2. Can either of them do it? No, Alex can't. He finishes in 12th. A huge improvement on that final flying lap. But the Haas of Benny, can he find half a second here at the def? He's the only driver in that drop zone still on a flying lap. As Max Martin peels onto the pits, Lennart is through safely, as is Luke Mills, Dan Edwin. Some big surprises there, some fantastic drives. Benny only 0.157 of a second up so far. It's not going to be anywhere near enough to get him through to Q3 and knock Big Sauce out. Is there anything Benny can do in the Haas car here through the final sector? He's navigating it perfectly, kissing the curves as he goes through, using up as much of the track as he possibly can in the number 73 Haas. Into the final corner then, can Benny do it? Can he get a Haas into Q3? No, he can't. It's a huge improvement, and in the end it's 0.05 of a second that he's knocked out of, and that was hugely impressive, but it's not quite enough on this occasion. And we lose Benny, Alex, FB, Andrej, and earlier we lost Semenako from Q2. And we now have a minute and a half to prepare ourselves, Tom, for the final shootout.
I mean, throw all of what I thought out of the window. That was absolutely incredible. Some beautiful laps there by Dan, by Luke, Lennart as well doing the business. But the driver that I want to point out first is Max Martin. This, for him, it feels like a bit of redemption. For part of the season last season, he was in that Red Bull. He was dropped, went to Alfa Romeo. This time last season, when we came to this race, he was out of Q2, narrowly missed out. This time, he's made it in. Dan as well, fighting off, but almost sort of throwing Benny's time in his face as the driver that left McLaren to go to their rivals that just edged them by 3 points last season in the Constructors, and that was Haas. Great job by the Williams to make it in, the team that finished 9th in the Constructors. Aston Martin still work to do then, but it's a big improvement from the team that was last in the standings. FB, I'm slightly disappointed by. We saw him best of the rest in 7th last season at this track, but this time it was his teammate Lennart doing the business. He also has a point to prove. He was dropped from Ferrari. He now races at Alpine. So there's so many storylines here, Torin. Lennart and Max Martin making a statement, but it's the drivers of Dan and the Brit of Luke doing the business in Q2. Can they replicate that in Q3? I don't know. I think Big Sauce and Arjan might have a bit more pace in hand, but we'll have to wait and see.
So, Tom, is there a chance that 4 different teams shooting out for pole here as well? Within half a second of each other, we have Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. Oh no, not Mercedes. Sorry, it was Williams and McLaren were involved as well. So this could be really exciting here. We've got multiple different constructors, half of the grid represented actually in this final qualifying session. It is a sight to behold, it must be said. In fact, more than half the grid. We've got McLaren, Alfa Romeo,
7 teams.
7 teams, 3 teams only not represented. Wow, what a grid we have for ourselves this season. And now we go on to the final session of qualifying. This is the one for all the marbles, as they say. A few drivers getting out nice and early, and Luke Mills in the Williams is the first one of them. And does he possibly see the shout of a pole position, not only for Williams, but also in his first race in the series? That would be something for certain.
That would be one for the history books. We haven't seen many first races or first appearances like that. Of course, I keep on bringing it up. I'm going to continue to bring it up. One young Red Bull driver at Silverstone a few seasons ago. Believe it was it Rillatorn or maybe Lennart? I can't remember now.
It was Lennart that day. Lennart had a stronger race, the dry to wet Silverstone that goes down in the history books. It must be said.
And it shows with a big appearance like that in your first race, what that can do for your SFR career, and really start to not only gain your self-confidence in your rookie season, but also start putting your name on the map to other teams that maybe will be looking towards the end of this season for a new driver to join their roster. We're on board with Lennart, I believe, at the moment as he rounds the final sector. What can he do? Can he replicate the performance of last session? Has he got anything for the likes of Luke or Dan for the best of the rest? Let's find out.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. 10 minutes left of the session now, so only a couple minutes in. This could be a tasty one. Lennart, the first driver, then onto a flying lap in the Alpine. It's hard to predict where these teams are, really. Having 7 teams in the final session just makes the pecking order even harder to put your finger on. Mercedes have lost time to the cut teams ahead in the off-season, which will be worrying for them, I'm sure. But Alpine and Williams, the first 2 teams, have their drivers onto flying laps here. We've got most of the teams out on the grid. Only Max Martin and Arjan not out on track currently. Everyone else on an out lap or a flying lap. And the time's going to come in thick and fast, starting soon. Starting with, it will be Lennart, followed by Luke Mills, followed by Dan Edwin. They'll be our first 3 across the line. It'll be interesting to see what kind of time differences we see as drivers coming through the first sector now. Lennart into the final sector, in fact, through that sweeping right-hander. It's looking very neat and tidy from the Alpine here. Of course, that is the fastest way to go around an F1 track, but it's also really going to depend on that engine power. We know Alpine have had issues with their engine. They're the only team on the grid to be using that Renault power unit. But can they work some wonders with the rest of the car? We're about to see. And at the hands of Lennart, what can he do in the number 47 Alpine? Here comes Lennart and set the benchmark. It's a 1:22.536, and that's not a bad time from the Alpine driver. Here comes Luke Mills then, across the line. He'll be the next driver to set a time. Can he beat Lennart's time? Not quite. It's a 1:23.8. He'll be looking to improve on that, I'm sure. Here comes Dan Edwin then. He'll be the next driver, followed by FICO. Through the final corner comes the lone McLaren left in this session. Dan Edwin blitz the 2 already set times. Can FICO beat them both? That would be what would be expected of him in the Ferrari. And he doesn't. He goes in behind Lennart, actually. And then across the line comes Vodka, and he goes top at 1:22.435. And there's still not much in it. Only really, yeah, just over 0.1 of a second from Vodka to Lennart. We'll have to see now what Kagoda can do. He'll be one of the next drivers to cross the line. But not before having to navigate that final sector where it all slipped away from him last season. It looked like the title was his, and in the most dramatic of fashion, in a video that now has got quite a good few views on YouTube for being named the most dramatic end to a sim race ever. And it's definitely up there. The ones I've seen, it possibly is. But here comes Kagoda. He'll be out for redemption through the final corner. Where can he put it? It's provisional pole for Kagoda, 1:22.355. And I was saying I thought he had a bit more pace left in him. He reveals it here, reveals his hand a little bit. Big source up to 6 for 1:23.7. Rillatorn, then the reigning champion. This was where he was crowned last season. He doesn't, his time hasn't come through by the looks of it, or maybe it's a glitch. But either way, he's on to another flying lap then by the looks of it, I would imagine. Kagoda then still in provisional pole, Rillatorn down in P10. But as I say, attacking a new lap, Arjan in the Ferrari. He'll be looking to beat his teammate. Ferrari, infamous for teammate battles. And I'm sure that can continue on with these two very talented drivers at the helm. Rillatorn you can see appearing in the background there, opening the DRS on the Red Bull. Here comes Arjan then through this tricky middle sector. Navigates it wonderfully. What can Rillatorn do? He looked a little bit slower and a little bit less sure of it through there. But as I say, this may well be an in-lap for him. His tyres being a little bit older. But he's still maxing out the engine down the straight. As Arjan goes a little bit off course there. I think he'll maybe just about get away with the track limits, but that will remain to be seen as to whether his time pops up on our timing screens or not. And the times at the top are very close. 3 different cars, 5 different cars make up the top 5 at the stands. Can Arjan break that number and break into the top 5 here? He does. He goes 5th place to 123.311. Goes ahead of his teammate Rillatorn. Then comes into the pits. As I was saying, those tyres look a bit scrub. So Max Martin coming out of the pits to set his first lap time. And Tom, would you believe it? Our championship contenders from last season framing the top 10, 1 in first, 1 in 10th.
Who would have thought that, right? No, I don't think anyone would have predicted coming into this race that Kagoda would have been starting in that first spot. But you can't forget, he was on pole here last time out, over a 10th ahead of Rillatorn. But those two are extremely quick around here. Those two were over 4/10 ahead of Lennart, who was the best of the rest in the Ferrari. Well, as I was saying at the end of Q2, this was a statement from Lennart after being dropped by Ferrari and joining Alpine. Well, this is less of a statement and more of a slap in the face. He's 3rd place in an Alpine tour, and who would have saw that coming? Certainly not me. And he's just about a 10th. I tell you what, forget that. Exactly a 10th, if my screen is telling me correct. Actually, a 10th and 1,000th. But he's so close to the top positions in an Alpine. It's absolutely incredible pace to see. Slightly disappointed by the Ferraris, I have to be honest. They're a team that were first in the hands of Kagoda and 3rd in the hands of Lennart around here last time out, and was possibly expecting a bit more from Arjan, who's got a big gap to his teammate. He did wonders for Alpine last time out. In this race, he was 6th place, and in terms of his outright pace, was fantastic. He had the 5th fastest lap out of anyone during the race, and had the 2nd longest stint. So it seemed that Alpine was really hooked up around here, but in the hands of Ferrari, which should do well, doesn't seem to be suiting him. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes, absolutely spot on. And here we go then. We are into the crunch time of qualifying. Strap yourselves in and get ready, because this is not to be missed. Max Martin, the first driver to post what I would imagine would be his final lap of his qualifying session. He was hugely impressive last season, one of the top drivers in my opinion, and he's going to be looking to retain that title again this season, trying to outperform his machinery. Getting through to Q3 on the first time of asking is impressive in itself, but it's really going to depend as well on how he can position the car on the grid tomorrow. But here comes Max Martin then. 2 minutes and 45 left to go in this session. Where can Max Martin put it? Can he place himself in that gulf from Dan Edwin to Big Sauce? Split the Mercedes further. Here comes Max Martin across the line. It's 5th fastest. He splits the Ferraris actually. A 123.199. A hugely impressive lap time from the Alfa Romeo driver. We've got a bit of traffic leaving the pit lane now as Arjan right behind Lennart, and behind them both comes Big Sauce. He'll be looking to improve from 8th, I'm sure. Rillatorn leading the pit lane, our defending world champion. At the same time, so does Kagoda, our former defending world champion. And his records will be the ones that Rillatorn will be chasing, and these two, I'd love to see those two reignite that rivalry this season. Luke Mills, the next driver, he'll be completing a flying lap then, as he comes through into the final sector now in the Williams. This will likely be his final lap of qualifying. A hugely impressive qualifying no matter where he finishes for Williams. Team that, as Tomo rightly said, finished 9th last season in the Constructors. Now, 9th on the grid provisionally in Q3 at the first round of the following season. Here comes Luke then through the final 2 corners. Where is he going to put it? It's not a particularly competitive lap. I think it might be another tyre warm-up lap actually. 8.4 seconds off of his previous one, and he looks like he's speeding as well onto a new lap. So I'd imagine, therefore, that it must be an extra warm-up lap. I think Fico's done the same, an extra warm-up lap in the Ferrari. As Lennart looks like he's doing the same, unless we've got a bit of a problem with the stopwatch here, because his lap time said it was 5 minutes long just there. Either way, here we go then. Multiple drivers getting ready to assault the track for one last time. Extra warm-up laps being done by many of those around. Now, we get ready to see what can everyone do on one last time. Kagoda and Rillatorn are right on each other's cars as Max Martin retires from the session. So obviously happy with his lap time, as it looks like he's retired in the pit lane and not crashed into the pit lane. That'd be my assumption at least. So here we go then. Rillatorn and Kagoda onto their final flying laps of this qualifying session. Luke Mills not improving marginally though, so he might be able to pull it out in the final sector here. Here comes Luke Mills on the Williams through the final corner. Can he improve on provisionally 9th place? And it's looking like he's going to. Yes, he's up to 7th. He goes ahead of Dan Edwin as the checkered flag falls now. So here comes Captain Fico. He will be looking to try and stake his claim to the pole position battle. He's currently sat P4. Can he improve? Fico through the final corner goes on to provisional pole on the Ferrari for 122.214. Here comes Lennart though. What does Lennart have to say about all of that? He does improve, but it's only marginal. He keeps 4th place for the time being. Here comes Vodka then. He takes provisional pole back. So 122.180. Dan Edwin, can he improve? He does. It's up to 5th place for Dan Edwin. Big Sauce through the final corner. Where does Big Sauce go to? It's a 123.1. He does improve, but the times to watch will be Kagoda and Rillatorn. They are the 2 here battling out. Rillatorn not with a time on the board just yet. Kagoda does, but Rillatorn no time on the board yet. Here comes Kagoda and through the final corner. Can he take pole position in the opening round of the season? He doesn't. He stays 3rd. Will Rillatorn take pole position? He does. It's a 121.574. He's found 6/10 of a second on his teammates in the same machinery. Wow, our defending world champion staking a claim there, making a statement, and what a lap from Rillatorn.
You're absolutely right, Torren. I mean, I was rubbing my hands together going, wow, this is awfully close, isn't it? But Rillatorn at the death, that was a performance and a statement, as you rightly said, if I've ever seen one. Doesn't even need a first run in Q3, comes out at the death, the last driver, he times it perfectly to get the most of the track's grip when it's the most rubbered in, and 6/10 on your teammate. What an incredible lap time. I mean, we've got an exciting fight behind him, but I'm sure Vodka and the rest of the crew in those top positions are going to be throwing everything at those first few laps, maybe an alternate strategy just to try and surmount him at the top. What a lap, as he rightly points his finger. He's first. He is the top driver.